Commissioner Sir Herbert Samuel, a man proud of his Britishness and of being a Jew. Winston was always a man of action, so his first instinct was to see the Palestine situation himself. Off he went from London on March 1st via Cairo to Jerusalem with Sir Herbert and also a shrewd and knowledgeable Army Colonel, T.E. Lawrence, now known to us as Lawrence of Arabia. But even before departing, he brokered a deal with Sheriff Hussein of Mecca, who had driven the Turks from the Arabian Peninsula. His sons would be given thrones. Faisal got Iraq, Abdallah got Transjordan, and the area west of the Jordan River would be Palestine. Churchill traveled by train from Cairo and stopped at the first large town within the borders of the new mandate, Gaza City. They were met by a screaming crowd shouting in Arabic, "Cheers for the minister and for Britain," but also an even louder cry, "Down with the Jews, cut their throats." Churchill and Sir Herbert, not understanding a word of Arabic, were delighted with the enthusiastic reception, and Colonel Lawrence thought it best not to translate. In a speech on Mount Scopus, Churchill said, "The hope of your race for so many centuries will be gradually realized here, not only for your own good, but for the good of the whole world." Churchill rejected the pleas of the Arabs and encouraged the Arabs to recognize the contributions that industrious Jews could bring to the area. He tried to calm their fears by stating that the British administration would continue for many years before any self-government could be put in place. He predicted, "All of us here will have passed from the earth, and also our children and our children's children, before it is fully achieved." Churchill's timeline was way off. Almost to the day, only 27 years later, the State of Israel was declared. Churchill's policy was based on continuing support for Zionism, combined with sensitivity to Arab concerns. It was now up to him to obtain British government approval. The House of Lords voted 60 to 29 against the government, with a prominent Conservative MP asking why the government had promised the Jews a national home in a country which is already the national home of the Arabs. But it was in the House of Commons where the final determination would be made. Churchill vigorously defended the government's policy, noting, "We cannot leave the Jews in Palestine to be mistreated by the Arabs, who have been inflamed against them. There is no doubt whatever that at the present time the country is greatly underpopulated," thereby reflecting what the Christian Zionists of the 19th century had stated of Palestine: "A land without people, a people without land." Churchill's speech had a desired effect. The Commons reversed the Lords by a decisive margin, and Britain's stewardship of Palestine began. 1922 was not only the year the mandate was approved, but also the year the Liberal government in which Churchill served was decisively defeated. To add further insult to injury, Churchill lost his own parliamentary seat and underwent emergency surgery. At the time, he famously quipped, "I found myself without an office, without a seat, without a party, and without an appendix. In 1929, Churchill roundly condemned the violence by Arabs against Jews in speeches and newspaper articles, but the policy in London tilted towards restricting Jewish immigration. Churchill had to accept the policy rather than open the gates to a large inflow that might worsen local conditions and make Britain's task more difficult. Anyhow, Churchill was out of power, with now a Conservative government led by Neville Chamberlain. On November 8, 1931, Churchill made this amazing statement in the Sunday Chronicle in a piece titled, "Moses, the Leader of a People." He said, "Moses was the greatest of the prophets, who spoke in person to the God of Israel and received from God that remarkable code upon which the religious, moral and social life of this nation was so securely fastened." Years later, Churchill would give Ben-Gurion a copy of that article. After Hitler came to power in 1933, Churchill spoke in the House of Commons of the dangers of German militarization and condemned discrimination against the Jews. He warned then with tremendous foresight, "There is a danger of the odious conditions in Germany being extended by conquest to Poland and persecutions being begun in this new area." During the remainder of the 1930s, Churchill was the leading voice in Britain against German expansion and rearmament, and the policy of appeasement favored by Chamberlain. Churchill met with Albert Einstein to support giving refuge in England to German Jewish scientists. In the beginning of 1939, Britain summoned Arabs and Jews to a roundtable peace conference in London. It failed for multiple reasons, one being that the Arab delegation refused to sit in the same room with the Jews. As a consequence, Britain acted unilaterally and in May issued a white paper limiting Jewish immigration severely. Chamberlain said, "If we must offend one side, let us offend the Jews, not the Arabs." In private, Chamberlain expressed to his sister, "No doubt the Jews are not a lovable people, and I don't care about them myself, but that is not sufficient to explain a pogrom." Churchill spoke forcefully against the white paper in a debate in Parliament, saying, "To whom was the pledge of the Balfour Declaration made? It was not made to the Jews in Palestine, but to the world Jewry, to that vast, unhappy mass of scattered, persecuted, wandering Jews, whose intense, unchanging, and unconquerable desire has been for a national home." But the large Conservative majority approved it 268 to 179. While the East was closed to Jewish immigration, the West was no better. Only 4 days later, on May 27th, the MS St. Louis arrived in Havana with 915 Jewish refugees, including my father, only to be refused entry. You know the rest of the story. Much to the fury of Germany, Churchill continued his criticism in a series of articles in newspapers and magazines, and helped found the Anti-Nazi League in 1936. And famously, he denounced the Munich Agreement in the fall of 1938, thundering, "The Prime Minister had been given a choice between war and dishonor. And you chose dishonor. And you will have war. Despite the fog of war, knowledge of Nazi atrocities reached Churchill and other Allied leaders fairly quickly. While precise details were not always clear, the fate of the Jews became increasingly apparent. What was Churchill's reaction? It was to decry and condemn what he called these vile crimes. In a message printed in the Jewish Chronicle, he added, "None has suffered more cruelly than the Jews, who have borne the brunt of the Nazi onslaught." Churchill believed that the way to aid the Jews was to destroy Hitler and Nazi regime first. In this he was absolutely correct. If Hitler had prevailed in his conquest of Russia, where a substantial number of Jews remained, or if Rommel had successfully moved through Egypt into Palestine, many more Jews would have perished. In a little-known footnote to history, recent research has confirmed that an Einsatzgruppe had been formed in Greece by the Nazis, waiting to proceed to Egypt and Palestine and deal with the 500,000 Jews there, as they had with the Jews of Poland and Russia. What could Britain and the Allies have done to bring more Jews to Palestine, particularly after 1943, when the tide of war turned against Germany? Churchill's war cabinet, a coalition of all parties, favored retention of the White Paper, limiting immigration. In addition, most senior civil servants involved in the administration of the mandate were sympathetic to the Arabs, and in this they were joined by most army officers stationed in Palestine. In 1942, an aide to Anthony Eden noted in his diary, "Anthony is immovable on the subject of Palestine. He loves Arabs and hates Jews." Churchill, in the meantime, continued to write and speak sympathetically in support of the Jews and of Zionist aspirations. He argued with his cabinet colleagues and civil servants about their tilt toward the Arabs and the lack of sympathy for Zionism, pointing out, "The Arabs have done nothing for us during the war." His efforts helped the Jews in marginal cases, such as the admittance of some 6,000 Romanian refugees through Istanbul in 1944. He chose not to argue for a wholesale opening of immigration into Palestine, since he would not have been able to overrule the prevailing view of the cabinet. In the final analysis, he was the powerful leader of a democratic coalition government, not an all-powerful dictator. On July 6, 1944, exactly 1 month after D-Day, Chaim Weizmann met with Anthony Eden and requested that the Allies warn the Hungarian government, who had been cooperating with the Nazis, that their action would face retribution at the end of the war. A series of broadcasts were made to that effect. Weizmann also requested that the rail lines to Auschwitz and Hungary be bombed. On being informed of this request, Churchill encouraged Eden to follow through, saying, "Get anything out of the Air Force you can, and invoke me if necessary." Ironically, the Hungarian deportations came to an end only 2 days later, but that was for a totally different reason. Although voted out of office after the war ended, Churchill had a continuing relationship with Palestine and Zionism, the details of which I will leave for another time. while in his heart remained a Zionist. His enthusiasm was